welcome everybody back to New Evidences for Joseph Smith YouTube channel. We have an update for you in the Book of Mormon Metals Map Geography. We're going to take a look at today at volcanic destruction that was described in the third book of Nephi in the 8th and 9th chapters. What we want to do is we want to discover if by using the Smithsonian's Global Volcanism Program database, if we can show that volcanic destructions, as described in 3rd Nephi, chapter 8 and 9, which occurred at the beginning of 34 AD, whether or not that was plausible. We also want to know if the Book of Mormon Metals Map Geography is plausible. We're going to find that the answers to those two questions is yes. We also want to ask, is the Heartland model of Book of Mormon geography plausible given these volcanic eruptions? And it appears to be very unlikely. Just to remind you, when we did the analysis of where the metals were found in the American continent in the abundance that the Book of Mormon talks about, in the lands that are referred to in the Book of Mormon, we only found one plausible solution, and that was that the land of first inheritance would have been in Ecuador, the land of Nephi up and to the east would have been in Colombia, and then Zarahemla with its gold and silver would have been within the Central American area. And then the land of Moron, where the Jaredite kings lived, would have been in Guadalajara, Mexico. We also see there that the small neck of land, or the narrow strip of wilderness, referred to in Alma 22, fits very nicely with the Isthmus of Panama, along with then the narrow neck of land with that narrow pass by the West Sea being a good fit for the Isthmus of Tehuantepec in southern Mexico. So we also see that this metals map also agreed with the prophet Joseph Smith's writings in the Times and Seasons. He had said that Lehi landed a little south of the Isthmus of Darien, which for us today is the Isthmus of Panama. And so that fits nicely with Ecuador as first inheritance, where Lehi landed. Also, the narrow neck of land, which embraces Central America, is obviously there. And he also said that Zarahemla, the city, stood upon Guatemala. And so we find that the metals map geography does fit also then with Joseph Smith's comments in the Times and Seasons. All right, so let's look at what happened in this area as described at the time of Christ's crucifixion in 34 AD. We have that described in 3rd Nephi chapter 8 and 9. There were a great many cities destroyed and many people were killed. There was explosive volcanic eruptions that explain the great and terrible tempest, the thunder, the shaking of the whole earth, and the thick vapor of darkness that smothered all light for 3 days. So when we look at these areas and divide the cities up into the metals map geography, we see Zarahemla in the Guatemala area that was burned, Moroni also in that area that was sunk into the sea. We see down in the Colombia area, there was a great and terrible destruction in the land southward. The city of Jerusalem is named. It was buried and covered with water. We know that it was not far from the city Nephi or the lands of Mormon. Think of the waters of Mormon. The land of Helam, where Alma and the church settled when they left the city of Nephi, and the land of Amulon. And then in central Mexico and north, a more great and terrible destruction occurred in the land northward. We know that King Jacob was the king of the Gadianton robbers that had escaped from Zarahemla and established a city up north. We know that that was burned. There are other places also listed, but they're unlocated. We don't know where they were. Now let's look at plausible explosive eruptions that could have occurred in 34 AD in the Americas. I want you to pay particular attention to the red column. That shows the volcanic explosivity index. For example, the very first one is Volcano Churchill that had a VEI of 6. That could have occurred in 34 AD. Now that was in Alaska. Now if you continue down, you'll see with the orange highlights the volcanoes that were in the Central American area or in the northern part of South America, and you'll see that those specifically are in Ecuador. Those then are in orange. So you have explosive eruptions that are possible to have occurred in 34 AD from a VEI 6 all the way down to the bottom there, the Three Sisters in Oregon at a 2. Now, how big are these eruptions? Well, if you remember Mount St. Helens when it blew up, and I do, that was a VEI 4. See it pictured there on the slide. Now, there was also recently a VEI 5, and that was in 1991, and that was Pinatubo in the Philippines, pictured here. Now, that means that it was 10 times the size of St. Helens. Those two pictures on the right are of Pinatubo. Here, up in the right side of the screen, you'll see the VEI scale more specifically with some of those mountains there mentioned. Now, if we go to the plausible non-explosive eruptions in 34 AD, we also see a significant number of them in the Central American area, and also one in Ecuador. Notice also that there's 4 of them that are undersea, and they are on the edge of the Pacific and Cocos plates, just off the Pacific coast of Central America. That's interesting. But these were not explosive eruptions. Now, if Mount Pinatubo, for example, which was a VEI 5, if it had erupted in, let's say, in Nicaragua, how would that have affected Central America and Northern South America? Well, what you see in the boxes there is an estimation of the same volume of land mass that was covered by ash by Mount Pinatubo. In its case, it covered all of the Philippines and across the South China Sea into Vietnam. So the Pinatubo ashfall covered 2 million square miles. That was about 1,000 miles on one side by 2,000 on the other. So you can see where the ashfall might have fallen if a Pinatubo type eruption had occurred in Central America, with winds varying all the way up to 34 kilometers or 21 miles high, which was the height of Pinatubo's explosion. So you could see that that would have a significant effect. All right, now let's look at the eruptions that could have occurred in 34 AD in that area. First of all, we have the 4 undersea eruptions off the coast of Mexico and Central America. That's interesting because it suggests that there was some plate tectonics going on at the time. There was 3 volcanoes that erupted explosively that could have occurred in 34 AD in Ecuador. Cotopaxi, Guagua, Pichincha, forgive my pronunciation. Both of those were VEI 4s, significant eruptions. And also Tungurahua, which was a 3, and it erupted perhaps in that time period twice. So, and those, by the way, were very close together in the area of the capital city today of Quito, Ecuador. All right, up in Costa Rica, there's a possibility of Irazu, which was a VEI 3. But close by, there was also Arenal, which was a VEI 4. Further north on the border between Mexico and Guatemala, you have Tacana. That was a VEI 4 eruption. A little further north, near Veracruz, you have Orizaba, which was a VEI 3. And then just south of Mexico City, Chichinautzin, that was a VEI 3. However, continuing the possible explosive eruptions in 34 AD in this area, there's Popocatépetl, which was a VEI 5, a little further south from Mexico City. So that would have been very significant. That's a Pinatubo type eruption. But then look at this one, Apoyaque in Nicaragua, which was a VEI 6. That would be 10 times the size of the eruption of Pinatubo or Popocatépetl further north in Mexico. So you can see that there potentially, it's plausible that there could have been, as the Book of Mormon described, a massive series of eruptions that caused great destruction in the land, great darkness for 3 days, many cities buried, many people killed. They couldn't light any fires. And so this was very common to describe when you're talking about an explosive volcanic eruption. So it appears plausible. Now, science would not suggest that this is probable without some historic record. And of course, most scientists today will not accept the Book of Mormon as a historic record. But the Book of Mormon does claim that there was such destruction that occurred in 34 AD. So was it plausible? Yes. And does it fit the metals map geography? It certainly does, to include the eruptions possibly in Ecuador. So there we have our conclusion then. Are they plausible? As we said, yes. Is the Book of Mormon metals map geography plausible? Yes, because it now includes the city of Jerusalem, which would have, in our model, be down in the Colombia, Ecuador area. And is the Heartland model of Book of Mormon geography plausible? It appears very unlikely that that would be the case. The Mississippi and Ohio river valleys may have been marginally affected by Churchill, which was a VEI 6, and Wrangell, which was a VEI 4, both of which erupted in that time period in Alaska. But the only one in the lower 48 that was explosive during that time period could have been Three Sisters in Oregon, and it was only a VEI 2. We know, for example, that St. Helens, which is also on that west coast area, when it went as a VEI 4, the darkness effect extended all the way over into Spokane in eastern Washington. So there you have it, perhaps additional evidence to support the metals map geography. Thank you very much.